Hello everyone. This is the 12th part of the story Game of Thrones, The Prideful One. Chapter 58. The siege started, with my men executing my plans to the letter, as I shouted, plunging my sword into the ground, "Do you know what's waiting beyond these walls?" My men in response started to stomp the ground with their feet, our prey, our enemies. My army at this rose their blades crying out with one voice, cheering for victory, cheering for the battle that was to come. With a smile forming on my face, I put on my helmet, as I rushed to the walls, being the first to climb the ladders, my Khalasar following close by. Hundreds of arrows were about to whistle through the air, but my ravens entered the scene, bothering the heck out of the archers, killing some in the process by pushing them off the edge. With this opportunity opening up, I make a hand signal. Half of my men split off, part of them trying to climb and the other battering the castle wall, howling like wolves with a thirst for blood. It took me a few seconds to climb the ladders, but once I was on the edge of the wall, I sprinted towards the archers that were still alive, half of my men behind him. The archers in defense tried to let off a volley of arrows at us, hitting some of my men. Dodging the incoming arrows, I leaped over the fortifications they had to protect the archers, sword flashing before my feet ever touched the ground. Landing behind them as the archers crumple to the ground as my sword cuts through them. It takes a moment for my men to catch up with and help me lay death into the archers. Within seconds we start to massacre them, erasing their primary defenses, rendering the walls completely useless against my horde of Dothraki climbing. With a smile, I turned around looking at the castle where the Magister was hiding, and with a nod, I confirm my next target. My men catch up to this almost unperceivable gesture and rally to the castle. As I dash for the castle, I hear the door being opened, and the rest of my army rushing in. They had no way of winning now, not that they ever did. It doesn't take me long before I reach the castle, the main event of this invasion. The archers at the castle unleash a fusillade of arrows, killing a few of my men as we advance. Every few yards another soldier would fall. Several of them are wounded, but if they were not dead they would keep moving forward, as they saw me, their king, charging into battle without fear. As for me, arrows won't stop me. I've been either cutting through them or using my shield to block them. By this point my shield is now quilled with them. As I advanced I see two archers showing their faces. With a smile forming on my face, I grabbed a spear that was dropped on the ground that belonged to one of my fallen comrades and with great force hurled at the archers. Catching them just above the chest, tearing through their throats like a needle and plunging them against the wall like a decoration. The archers, seeing that their efforts were completely in vain and ineffective to slow us, throw down their bows, and take up their spears and swords racked behind them. But unfortunately for them, I'm already upon them, cutting them down with ruthless precision. Every time my Valyrian sword flashes through the air another man falls, and I just kept sweeping through them like flies, my face painted with their tainted blood. After a second my men catch up and are fighting beside me now, and these sellswords are no match for the Dothraki in hand-to-hand combat. On the other side of the castle, my army is slaughtering the sellswords. As for me, I'm not even breathing hard after the slaughter. This was a piece of cake. I didn't even wake up Neltharion with all this, who was still sleeping on my jacket. With a smile I remove my helmet as I see my army eradicate the rest of the pitiful army they had to defend. With my Dothraki searching the grounds and rooms, dispatching any dying soldiers or men inside the castle. As I take a seat against the wall, one of my blood riders hurries over to my side. "The castle is my call." The Dothraki cheer at this, happy for my victory, their victory. "Any updates about the Magister?" I inquired. I had told them specifically that I wanted to be the one to kill him. "There's one area left, that is over 500 men," my blood riders nodded, considering he wasn't able to escape the island, by any means, the bastard was there. "Good, take me there," I smiled. As I walk to the last part of this castle to conquer, I gaze up at the sky, slowly turning my eyes to the captain of this sellsword company. They are 150 meters away, give it or so, still alive, because my men knew better than to kill them without me here. With a smile, I point at the captain. "Is your boss inside?" as I shouted and inquired. "Yes, but we are not going to defend him, this is out of our pay," the captain said, trying to weasel out of this one. "We could work for you." "So you will betray your current patron, for me?" I chuckled as I grabbed a spear from one of my men. With my chuckle turning into a dark smile I heft the spear up, as I calculated the distance and how much force I would need, and throw it at him. The captain barely has time to react to what was happening, but by the moment he realizes what is about to happen, is too late as the spearhead had already found its mark his chest, piercing him and 5 men to the ground. The captain clutches at the wooden shaft, not comprehending his fate, fear being the last emotion he experienced. The sellsword stared at his fallen captain and looked at me. "Why would I want someone that will betray me for the better bidder?" I said coldly, as I gave the signal to my men to slaughter them. "Men like you don't deserve the honor to serve me, all you deserve is my blade." The Magister was not happy to see, but oh, how happy I was for this opportunity. I was as happy as any man about to kill someone threatening his family could. "Hello there," I smiled, taking a seat, seeing the men tremble before me. "I surrender," the Magister said, lowering his head. "Oh, that's not how it works, my friend," I chuckled, patting him on the back. "You lost any human rights the moment your mind sailed and decided to make my wife a whore, albeit impossible, as you saw today, the mere thought." "Well, I have no words, you must now." The Magister was shaking uncontrollably by this point, peeing himself on fear as I soothed him. "No, don't cry now, you will need those tears later, but for now, I want to know, who told you I was coming?" I had received the raven, but it wasn't signed. I had a hunch it was Illyrio, but I could be wrong. "A Magister," the Magister answered, not daring to look at me in the eyes. "You have any idea how little those that narrow it down?" I sighed. "Ordello, a friend of Illyrio," the Magister said between rasped breaths. "Good boy," I patted him, with a soft smile, making him look at me for a second, receiving immediately a punch that knocked down many of his teeth. "Did I give you permission to look at me, worm?" "No," the Magister said, bleeding badly through his mouth. "Exactly. Now, as for your sins," I hummed, remembering Neltharion wanted to chip in, which gave me an idea. "You will die, but your gruesome death needs preparation." My idea was to replicate the Sicilian bowl just for him, which was an ancient torture device used in Greece. This bowl was a hollow brass statue crafted to resemble a real bull. The victims were placed inside, with no escape. The door was shut tight, sealing them in. Fire them would then be lit around the bull. As the victim succumbed to the searing heat inside, he would thrash about and scream in agony. The movements and sounds would be muted by the bull's mass, and thanks to the design of the bull, the sounds inside would transform and sound outside like those of a real bull. I would commission the bull, and Neltharion would set the bull on fire with his cute fire, and that way my little dragon son would feel helpful. "Make sure he doesn't kill himself," I ordered my Dothraki, as they dragged him to a cell. With Lis under control, I couldn't help but wonder what was Daenerys doing right now. Chapter 59. The appropriation of the Lis was pretty calm, and without any problems. After all, the people of Lis already hated their Magister for what he did to them in these dire times, and were too afraid or grateful to complain. But I knew soon most of Essos would love me, because I would change the political play, starting with Lis. For starters, having slaves would be illegal and punishable by death. If the slaves in question wanted to stay with their masters, for any reason, be it Stockholm Syndrome or because their masters were actually decent persons, they would be allowed to, as long as it was clear they could leave their post at any given time. Raiding would be non-existent, and the Dothraki would be the army of Essos to stop anyone trying to rise in the profession they had left behind, because of me. The Dothraki, in turn, would get paid like the army does, with their salaries, or in this case, food and items they require, coming from the exuberant taxes Essos had. Seriously, no wonder every Magister is extremely rich. The taxes are 3 times what Westerosi people pay. I, of course, would try to lower the taxes, if possible, but for now was but a nice thought. To have a general idea of how much I could reduce them, I needed to have every city under my control. With Lis alone my estimate would be really inaccurate, and perhaps implausible. "My call," my blood rider said, entering the room I was occupying, the old office of the Magister. "I was here reading documents and other papers to understand the socio-political state of this city a bit better." "Yes," I said, acknowledging him. "The Khaleesi is safe and sound, inside the castle as you requested," my blood rider informed proudly. "Very good, let her know I'll be with her in a minute," I smiled, as I went back to read all documents the soon-to-be-roasted men had. "As you command, blood of my blood rider left, to complete his task, diligently, may I add." "Blood of my blood," I chuckled, wondering. Would I ever get used to this? Daenerys' point of view. The siege lasted a bit more than a day, outnumbers and strategy proving to be vastly superior to Lis' defenses. Ronard had not only won in a timely manner but had done it without killing almost any civilians, getting a massive approval from the citizens that originally feared the Dothraki horse would lay waste to their tropical land. Now, our tropical island, Ronard, has promised he would give me a safe place to have our kids and recover, and like everything so far, he has delivered every promise. Lis was officially our first conquest together, the place where my kids would be born. My Khaleesi, one of Ronard's blood riders, said entering my chambers, "Our great call will be with you shortly." That sounded like Ronard, always working, worthy of being king, my king. Very well, thanks. With that, I was left alone, with my 2 small baby dragons, and my personal squad of ravens. Ned Stark point of view. After a few days of travel, I had finally arrived at the garrison my son had set close to the borders of the Riverlands. It was relatively close, with only being 5 days of travel to get there from the castle of House Tully. Once I arrived, I couldn't help but find that it was surprising to see that all the houses of the north, my land, had raised their banners to help my son set this injustice I had suffered right. For the exception of House Mormont, they had refused to come, not that I blamed them for it. Many did, that was at least what Kat said. "Father!" Rob cried out the moment I stood out the car, hugging tightly, with love, but something about him was different. This war had changed him. "You have done good, I'm proud of you." I smiled genuinely. My son had held a war without succumbing to the pressures of one. "I have only done what you would have done," Rob smiled, as he turned to Kat that had just recently gotten out of the carriage. "Mother." Rob approached her, hugging her in the same lovely embrace he gave me as he asked, "How is grandfather?" "Good," Kat answered drily, as she started to walk away to what I assumed was our tent. "I need to rest for the moment, my head hurts." Rob sighed as he gave me a look. "Does it have to do with Ronard?" I sighed back. "It does. I don't agree with her ideas about what is going on with Ronard." I believed her at first. Rob smiled sadly, seeing his mother fade into the background. "But he saved you, he brought you back to the north where you belong, and until he proves otherwise, he is someone I would like to call a friend." I smiled at my son, but the matters were a bit more delicate than that. Ronard wanted the throne, and so did everyone but ours, so that only left me with 2 options. Either I waged war against Ronard, who was part of us, part of our kin, a true northerner like almost everyone at this garrison, or I helped him. Enemies or allies, there wasn't a middle ground, and I had to make that choice. "I know." I smiled. Sansa Stark point of view. Father was safe and sound. At first, I thought it was a cruel joke from Joffrey. That little monster would surely enjoy seeing me get hopes just to crush them under his heel. But, after getting a few more ravens, I had no other choice but to believe it. Father was alive, and the responsible for it was Ronard. He had saved Father when he didn't have to. It's been a while since I last saw him, but I have so much to thank him. He might not have ended marrying me, but he had kept his promises. He had kept me safe, even from afar. Something Mother didn't see at all. She hated him, for reasons I had yet to find. She was so unfair with him that made me question everything I had seen from her. Was this the same treatment Jon received? Was Jon like Ronard, mistreated and misjudged by her delusional mind? After all, that was the only description I could come up with. Ronard had done nothing but help us, and yet she hates him. Perhaps I should write Jon a letter, apologizing for how I treated him, because apparently I had just opened my eyes to the truth. How naive I was. Form your own opinion, Sansa. Don't let others decide what you think. You are a wolf, Sansa, not a sheep. And only the sheep follow others blindly. You were right all along. Arya Stark point of view. I knew it. Ronard would never hurt us. He was our friend. I'm never wrong with the people I like, and he was on my list of people I considered great. He had saved Father, just because he could. He had kept our family, our pack of wolves, together. Mother was like always in the wrong about him, like she has always been about Jon, and what ladies should do and not do. One day I would pay him all he had done for us. Maybe I could be one of his knights. He did say I had talent. One day I would be his fawn, the fawn of the Westeros. I like that name. I laughed as I continued to practice with my sword. Cersei point of view. Lord Stark had escaped my grasp and had joined his family and their army, whose plan was to overthrow their rightful king Joffrey if that wolf allied himself with Stannis. and they somehow managed to convince Renly to join them, our heads would be on the ropes by next morning. This, of course, was totally implausible, for Renly and Stannis hated each other and would never bend the knee, and as for Lord Stark, he was in debt with Ronard for saving him. How did Ronard's influence manage to get so far as to have people inside our ranks eluded me, but was a clear statement I had misjudged the little lord. He certainly played the game better than I had anticipated, better than most. After all, by saving Lord Stark he had most likely won an ally, and had, in turn, weakened us. Father had the little bear in high regard, saying that out of all the enemies we were facing, Ronard would prove to be the most dangerous and unpredictable. But like always, we would come on top. We were lions, and lions won. Even Tyrion, that little monster, had given his pitiful existence some value after he sealed an alliance with Euron Greyjoy, gaining his fleet to our side. "Sister, we need to talk," Tyrion said, entering my room, already ruining my day. "What do you want? Make it quick," I inquired. "We need to talk about Myrcella and possible alliances," Tyrion said, getting a cup of wine. He wanted to sell my daughter like a whore, as father had done with me? How could he even consider that my children belonged with me, and with me, they would all stay? "I will not sell Myrcella like a cheap whore." I hissed at him, wanting to strangle his little neck and see his life slowly fade away. "Father has already agreed on it. I was just being polite, but we need the Martells on our side. We have no allies." Tyrion sighed, shocking me what he had said. Father had agreed to this? After everything our house had done to theirs, Myrcella would die there. "They would kill her there," I growled. "Dorne is known for two things: no boundaries when it comes to sex, and that they don't harm children," Tyrion said. "I will take this discussion with father. He can't decide these things without me," I said before storming out of the room, looking for father. Chapter 60. It was the evening of my second week in Lis. Before leaving I had to set and put everything ready for Daenerys so she wouldn't have to move a finger, so with that in mind, I stayed setting up the city for her, a little paradise just for her. So after 2 weeks, I was finally due to leave, but as if the gods wanted me to stay, the wind started to howl outside, shaking the sea violently. Apparently, a storm was coming our way, a really big one. Which meant I would have to delay my plans for a couple of days or so, at least for the moment being. Not that I really cared. Daenerys was probably in her last month of pregnancy at this point. And while I wanted to start waging my war to the other cities so as to keep her out of the enemy's sight, a bigger part of me wanted to see my children. I wanted to hold them. "It seems you are staying," Daenerys smiled. "Maybe our little chimeras will decide to come out during this time. Maybe they want to say hi to Daddy." "Heh, that would be lovely," I chuckled, touching her belly with the utmost care, wondering if my little warriors would come out and say hi soon. Our motherly caw. Instincts feel they are about to hatch. Any time this week. The ravens that usually protected her, or brooded her pregnant, stated, and while I knew what they meant by that she was about to hatch, the image they put on my head was disturbing, to say the least. "What do they say?" Daenerys giggled. "That our little chimeras are about coming any day now," I answered with a smile of my own. As we continued to talk about how the kids would look, and names for them, my mind started to ponder on what was my family on Bear Island doing right now. I knew they were safe, and out of the political mess that was moving inside the Seven Kingdoms. That was the main reason I had left them there, to avoid any of them getting hurt, a safe haven for them, like the one I'm giving Daenerys right now. But even though I knew they were safe, I didn't really know how was my little cousin, Lyanna, or my Aunt Meech. Were they happy? Sad? Something in between? Meech Mormont point of view. Today, like every afternoon, I was alone walking in the forest with one of the many of armored bears Ronard left behind, with my mind on the idea that it had been quite a while since my great-nephew left to Essos. Originally it was intended to be a simple and uncomplicated business trip, and yet, somehow he ended up marrying Daenerys Targaryen, also declaring his intentions to conquer the known world, becoming one of the most prominent players on this war game. Did I approve what he was doing? No, in a million years, but he was family, and we bears stand together, against anything and anyone, because we don't have a reason to stand for our family. We don't need to be logical. But I can't say I fault my little nephew. Everything started when they broke his betrothal, and he probably made his second one with rage and thirst for retribution. "Mom, when is Cousin Ronard coming back?" Lyanna inquired, running towards me, smiling at the bear. Like always, she was wearing her custom-made battle armor, Since Ronard left, she had been practicing non-stop to be a warrior on pair with him, wanting to be of use to us, to his cousin. Maybe he needs a bodyguard? I smiled. No matter how impulsive Ronard's decisions were, he had made such a good impression on everyone that served under him or with him, that we would follow him to hell. He will be back soon. He is one of us, and we bears don't die so easily, we bears stand together. Lyanna smiled, satisfied with the answer as she left, fading deep into the woods to practice. Stupid boy, I growled with a smile on my face. If you wanted help taking over Essos, why didn't you call us? We bears must stick together. Daisy Mormont point of view. Ronard had left and had started a war without us, his family, and that was something I planned to fix. I wasn't going to let my cousin go into battle without us. Not any longer, not without his armored bears, and his armored ladies, as he used to call us. You were right, Mother has no idea when he is coming back. Lyanna sighed with a pout, that turned to smile really fast. Where are we leaving? Lyanna had discovered my plan to go and help Ronard, and the only way I managed to buy her silence was to offer her to come with me, and it wasn't like she was going to charge into battle. Ronard would probably have her with his new wife. As for me, I wanted to go into this war with him. I wanted to ensure he would come back to us, his family. He was beyond reckless, always acting like he was invincible, unstoppable, unkillable, but no one really is, so he needed us, by his side, to help him. We have to leave tonight. I have gathered half of the bear squadron, and some of our men. I smirked at her. Very well, Lyanna smiled excitedly. Finally, we will be able to serve the vodka bringer. One of the many armored bears coming with us growled, as soon the other growled in approval. Sometimes I feel they can understand me, Lyanna added with a puzzled look on her face. Later that night, Lyanna and I left the house, being careful as to not be seen or hear. The men I had gathered were loyal to Ronard like everyone on the island, but unlike others, these would keep quiet, so that Mother wouldn't stop us. So you finally decide to leave? The voice of my mother stopped me cold on my tracks as I was running through the forest. She was standing against the tree with a mug of vodka on her left hand, and her weapon on her right, looking at us, with cold-blooded eyes for a brief yet long moment that seemed to last an eternity before she suddenly smiled. Be sure to slap the brat for me. He would dodge it. I laughed as if the palpable tension that was a few minutes ago had never existed. Is the thought what counts? Mother laughed, turning her gaze to Lyanna. I will go, you can't stop me. Lyanna said, standing her ground, as if ready to fight her way out of this, knowing full well Mother would give her the spanking of her life. I want tea. Mother laughed, so loud and fluidly that her mug was spilling vodka around as if leaking. I killed my first men when I was your age. I learned how to fight before I even learned how to read. That is our way. Ronard made our island safer, but it wasn't always like that. We the women's of Bear Island don't stand by as the men fight. We fight with them and we fight better. So go out there and come back, or I will bring you back to life and kill you again for disobeying me. Lyanna smiled, nodding. I will make sure she comes back, I smiled. You better make sure we have the same amount of bears or more when you come back, Mother laughed, as she moved out of the way. I believe your crew is waiting. Renly Baratheon point of view. I had the Tyrells with me, and an army of 100,000 men, loyal to me, and yet, I was losing. My brother in the north refused to bend the knee for me. All I had was Loras, who firmly believed I was going to win. I had to unite the 7 kingdoms so that I could focus on getting rid of the menace that the Lord of the Bear Islands had become. Why so tense? Loras smirked, kissing me. Do you have some tensions to release my king? I do, but only their heads rolling would fix that. I smirked at him, kissing him back. Though, your body does wonders. I know, and it's all for you, Loras said, and after that, I was engulfed in the fiery pit of pleasure. Chapter 61. Daenerys' point of view. It has been a couple of weeks since Ronard decided to stay after an awful storm, and I was full of hope he would see our children's first breath of air, and it seemed that time was coming near. I could feel it. This morning was very cold, and for some reason my back ached a lot. Ronard wasn't on the bed, probably working on the office, so I staggered as I walked to find him. Thirst filling my body with an unfathomable strength, drying my very core. Deciding it was best to satiate this basic need first, I went to my night table and drank the cup of water that was placed there. As I stared at the cup, feeling as if I was drinking air, not really satiating the feeling I had. After finishing that unsatisfying cup of water, that did close to absolutely nothing, I decided to continue my quest to find Ronard. My mind and body needed him. As I walked through the long castle halls that seemed to have become plains on their own right, I asked everyone if they had seen Ronard. Nobody knew where he was, and by the looks of the ravens following me with worriedly looks through, neither did they. After a few hours looking, with noon coming close, the backache increased, sending chills down my spine, working itself into a slow rhythm. And with this it dawned on me very clear that my little chimeras were not waiting any longer. "Where in the seven is that man?" I growled, desperate. He had to be here. This pain was as much as it was mine. My search for Ronard elongated until the afternoon. My backache had evolved and was encircling my entire being. By this point I could do nothing but pant and whimper in pain, the steady rattle of rain dampening her moaning call for succor. The pain that started as nothing but a soft back pain had increased to waves of cramping agony that left me gasping for breath, and on and on. The ravens at this point were panicking. Some even flew away to find Ronard, with the pain abstracting my feeling of time that became night in the blink of an eye. I could hear the doctors Ronard had hired murmuring to each other. I could see the tops of their stupid heads. I could feel their concerns. And suddenly, like a dam breaking without notice, with a pain that struck fast like a lightning, my water broke. With more surprise than concern, I looked down the floor that was drenched with whatever came out of me. All but one thought occurred to me once again: where in the seven was my husband? Ronard Mormont point of view. Today was a great day to go out for a hunt with Neltharion. He wanted to eat, and enjoyed hunting his meals with me. So as to make it more interesting, I sneaked with my dragon son out of the castle, making sure to avoid everyone, including my ravens. Today it was all about me and Neltharion. And what a great day it was! Neltharion had eaten 10 times his weight. I could feel it on my shoulder, and while he wanted to keep hunting, the night was already about us and everyone could be worried about us. Caw! That sound was indistinguishable. One of my raven had found me. With a smile I turned around, to see around 20 ravens flying at me. Getting closer and closer, too close. Caw! All the ravens cawed in one voice, not slowing down, not even a bit. Why weren't they slowing down? At this point they would crash with me. They must know that, right? Right? Caw! Like a thunder, all the 20 ravens collided with me, peaks first making me flinch in a mild amount of pain. It didn't hurt much. It was the equivalent of stepping on a Lego with a normal human body. But still, ouk. Why the heck are you guys doing that? I asked them, partly angry, but a bigger part of me was confused as to why they would try to kamikaze themselves against me. That stun had done more damage to them than me. Lady Corntaker and her eggs are hatching. All the ravens said in one voice. Hatching. Fuck. Fuck. It took my brain a full second before I could process and react to this news, and before I knew it I was running through the forest, leaving the flash in shame. Hisses. Neltharion hissed, digging his tiny claws on my shoulder to not fall like a meteor on the ground. I grabbed the little dragon and kept him on a tight grip while I ran through the forest, with the city looming nearer and nearer, as if I was zooming into a pic. It took me a couple seconds to reach the city, but I didn't stop nor slow down. I continued to run, with my ravens flying behind me, dashing through the city as if it was in flames. It only took me a couple more minutes to reach the castle that I just parkoured to the top, with my fingertips bleeding lightly for the harsh treatment. Following my ravens, until I eventually heard Daenerys, her voice cracking and asking for me, in pain. That alone pushed me into overdrive, giving me a nitro push that increased my already high speed even more. Eventually I reached the room where she was at, and with a kick strong enough to bust the door down, I ran towards my wife, who just glared at me. Sorry, I was hunting, I said, holding her hand. Traditions say. The doctor was about to tell me how I shouldn't be here, but the piercing and deadly gaze of my wife in pain was enough to shut him up. Where the fuck were you? Daenerys asked, panting with pain. I was hunting with Neltharion, I said, explaining myself once again, while pointing to the scared dragon that was clutching with all his might to my chest with his tiny claws, still processing what happened. I hate you. Daenerys growled, gripping my hand with enough strength to bring a normal man down. You don't, I whispered to her ear, letting her trash my poor hand all she wanted. I do right now. Daenerys shouted, pushing once more, her face being red for this immense effort she was putting. This continued for a couple of hours, and before we realized it we heard the sharp, angry, and surprisingly loud cry that thundered inside the room. Before we could even process what we heard, the doctor smiled as he said it was a boy. The doctor handed the baby to me, so small, as if he knew I was his papa. The baby stopped crying, tiny fingers curling around my pinky. I never felt so powerless, so out of control. I watched my son peer through brand new eyes at what must be such a strange world, with no fear, only wonder. I tried to form a coherent sentence, but my mind was drunk with emotions, tears flowing like a fucking river through my eyes. A few moments after, a similar but equally sharp cry echoed the last one, startling me a bit, thundering with equal strength inside the room. "It's a girl," the doctor said, handing the baby girl to Daenerys. With something reminiscent of a smile, the little baby looks at us as with eyes filled with nothing but innocence. I smiled with a cracked chuckle as I see her tiny legs kick in a tiny jagged motion, looking for that resistance they are used to inside the womb, I guess. "They are so beautiful," Daenerys said weakly, with a smile that could overthrow the sun. By this point, my mind was partially back together. They are, and nothing will ever harm them. "Kawu. I am not crying, you are. I need a tissue. I need one, Ka. Ka so, Ka beautiful. We won't let anyone hurt them, Ka." This marks the end of part 12 of the story Game of Thrones, The Prideful One. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.